Hi everyone, and welcome to Lecture 3, our unit on nutrition and digestion. And first, let's talk about food. So, we want to take a look at first this short video about what happens when we actually stop eating food. This is going to illustrate the importance of diet and nutrition to our bodies. So take a minute, exit the PowerPoint, and go ahead and watch this short video. Okay, so now hopefully you have a much better idea from the video about how food is extremely important to our bodies. It's what our body actually runs on. We need it for a number of things. The two main things that I really want us to focus on today is that we need food for energy to function, and we're able to break down this food to give us the raw material or matter to build new molecules that we need to survive. This includes things like building proteins. Remember, proteins are long strings of amino acids that have very specific functions in our body. Some of the most important of these proteins make things like bones, muscles, skin, hair, and perform other essential functions that are very important. Now, the study of food and its effects on the body is called nutrition. Now we're going to look more in detail at some of these things listed at the bottom of our screen here. We're going to break them into essential nutrients, being water, vitamins, and minerals, and something called macronutrients. And these are things that we generally associate with nutrition, like fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. First up is water. Now, why is water so important? So you often hear, you need to drink at least 64 ounces of water a day, but why is it important to our bodies? And the reason that it's so important is that because every cell in the body needs water to complete many of the processes and chemical reactions that go on within the body that keep you healthy. And as everyone knows, when they haven't had enough water, it certainly can cause problems in all of your body systems. Now, vitamins are organic molecules that are needed by the body to help perform important chemical reactions. There are 14 essential vitamins separated into two types, that being fat-soluble, vitamins A, D, E, and K. And these vitamins are stored in the fatty tissues of the body. And then our second type is water-soluble. Now, these are vitamins C and B, which cannot be stored. Next up are minerals. These are inorganic nutrients that the body needs. All of these minerals are found in the periodic table. So if you remember back to any sort of chemistry class that you've ever had, you might recognize some of these. So have you heard of something like magnesium, which is needed for the normal functions of nerves and muscles? Iron, so that's indicated by the Fe symbol that you can see up towards the top here. And Fe stands for iron. Iron plays a very important role in the protein hemoglobin, which we're going to learn a lot more about when we talk about the circulatory system. This protein is largely responsible for carrying oxygen to all of the areas of our bodies. And then calcium, something we might be familiar with, that makes up a large proportion of our bones. And now on to the macronutrients, so the fats, carbs, and proteins that we get through our diet. Fats are very important to our body, although they have somewhat of a negative connotation, as far as nutrition, but they are very important to our body functioning properly. Dietary fats are essential to give our body energy and support cell growth. They also help to protect our organs and help keep our body warm. Fats also help your body absorb certain important nutrients and produce vital hormones. Now, there are two main types of fat that we've probably heard of, and this includes saturated fat. This is often called bad fat because too much of the saturated fats tend to raise bad cholesterol levels in your blood. And then unsaturated fats, which are often termed good fats. And think of these, included in foods such as nuts, avocados, and certain types of fatty fish. Next up is protein. Now, proteins are very, very important. They provide the body with the material for growth, and they make up bones, muscles, skin, hair, and other internal organs. Also, an important type of protein in the body are called enzymes. Now, we learned a little bit about the enzyme lactase in our got lactase activity when we were studying genetics and nutrition. And remember, the lactase enzyme specifically breaks down the milk sugar lactose into galactose and glucose so our bodies can use it for energy. And so enzymes have a very, very important role in how our bodies function. And to help you, just to give you a little bit of a hint into how these proteins are named, the ending of the protein gives a hint as to the protein's possible function. And what I mean by this is if it ends in the IN ending, it is a protein. Now, can you think of any proteins that end in IN? We just talked about one in relation to the circulatory system a few minutes ago. If you thought of hemoglobin, you are exactly correct. So this is a protein which has a specific function to carry oxygen to all the areas of our body. And if it ends in ASE, it is an enzyme protein. Can you think of any enzyme-like proteins that we've talked about? You probably thought of lactase, which we just talked about a few seconds ago. So remember, this is an enzyme that specifically catalyzes the reaction to break down lactose, the sugar in milk, to produce glucose and galactose that allows us to use that glucose for energy. And then next up is carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are extremely important because these serve as our major source of energy. Now, there are three forms that we eat. The first is simple sugars, which are present naturally in things like fruits. There are complex starches, which are made up of sugar molecules that are strung together in long, complex chains. And think of these foods that contain complex starches as things like beans, whole grains, oatmeal, vegetables. And the third is a carbohydrate called cellulose. And another name for cellulose is fiber. Importantly, fiber can actually not be broken down by our digestive systems, but it helps us process food more efficiently. Now, an important question is what happens to excess carbs in our body? Well, if the carbs aren't going to be immediately broken down for energy in the form of glucose, a certain amount is going to be stored in our cells as a molecule called glycogen, which is a long-term storage form of the sugar glucose. Now, if your glycogen reserves are completely full, your body does have the capability to turn carbohydrates into triglycerides and actually store them as body fat. Now, all of these essential nutrients are in the food that we eat. Food contains carbohydrates, contains fats, and contains proteins. And now, we talked about this in the previous slide, the question, what is our main source of energy? And you should have known from when we were discussing carbohydrates in the previous slide that, in fact, our main source of energy is carbohydrates. We learned from the video in the beginning of the lecture that when we haven't eaten carbs, our bodies can break down fat for energy. This is often a process called ketosis. Now, importantly, carbs are broken down by the digestive system to the simple sugar glucose, an extremely important sugar for our bodies. Our cells use glucose for cell respiration to produce usable energy. And as a backup, we can use fats and even protein if we need to. Now, it's important to understand the energy that is in the food we eat. And in fact, that's why we measure energy in the food we eat in the form of calories. You may have heard the term calories in respect to particular foods like, oh, that food is very high in calories, so you might not want to eat as much. But what actually is a calorie? Now, a calorie, simply put, is a measure of the amount of energy that is in the food we eat. And if we want to get very, very specific, it is the amount of heat energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. If we flip around our food and we look at our food labels, we see calories denoted with an uppercase C as compared to the lowercase c that we see on our slide. Now, the uppercase C indicates kilocalories, and 1 calorie with an uppercase C equals 1,000 lowercase c calories. This might be easier to understand if we look at our example down here where 1 jelly bean equals 3 kilocalories, or calories with an uppercase C, and this is actually equivalent to 3,000 lowercase c calories. Understanding our own nutrition is one of the best ways to keep us healthy, and knowing how to read and interpret the information on the back of a food label is a way to understand the things that you are putting into your body. You can see the different types of food labels as examples here on our slide. And this helps us figure out what is in the foods that we eat. I've highlighted a number of things over on the right food label that we can see with our food label indicating that it comes from a bag of cookies. These numbers, the first thing I want you to notice is the serving size of the food that we eat. So we notice that the serving size here is going to be 3 cookies, but if we look at the serving size per container, there's about 17 servings of 3 cookies in this entire container. So if you were to eat the entire container of cookies, that would be quite a lot of calories and quite a lot of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. You also want to keep an eye on the calories that you're consuming, indicated here at the top, the total fat, the total carbohydrates, and the total proteins. You might also want to look at the vitamins contained in the foods that you eat, and also you might want to take a glance down at the ingredients. So, what should our plates actually look like during a meal? And I love this breakdown of kind of our complete plate if we are to have a healthy, balanced meal. We can see that most of our plates should be fruits, vegetables, and healthy carbohydrates. And smaller portions should come from meat, eggs, fish, milk, and dairy, with a very small portion coming from oils and spreads. And you'll notice that over to the left side, you see things that are generally considered unhealthy, a lot of unhealthy sauces, cookies, potato chips, muffins, chocolate, candy, and ice cream. These are things that should be eaten in moderation, and you should eat less often. Now, how many calories should you actually be eating in a particular day, and in what amounts? This is kind of an open question, and it depends really on your nutrition